The Bataan Death March stands as one of the most harrowing events of World War II in the Philippines. 75,000 Filipino and American troops held as prisoners of war were cruelly compelled to embark on a nightmarish journey. Unknown to many, a similar grim chapter unfolded in southern Philippines known as the Iligan Death March, or sometimes referred to as the Mindanao Death March. What enduring impact did these death marches leave in history? This is the horrible story of the Bataan Death March and other death marches in history. Let's set the stage. The year is 1941. Japan launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, thrusting the United States and its allies into World War II. The Philippines, under American control, was one of the first places Japan targeted in the Pacific Theater. In 1942, Japanese forces overwhelmed American and Filipino defenders on the Bataan Peninsula. After months of relentless fighting, the exhausted and malnourished Allied troops were forced to surrender during the fall of Bataan. What followed was one of the darkest chapters of World War II, which is the Bataan Death March. Approximately 75,000 American and Filipino prisoners of war were forcibly marched over 60 miles under the scorching heat and brutal conditions, with no food and no water. The term Death March sends shivers down the spine, and for a good reason. It signifies the darkest side of human conflict, the forced marches of prisoners under unimaginable conditions. Death marches involve grueling physical labor, relentless abuse, the deliberate neglect of prisoner injuries and illnesses, cruel starvation and dehydration, humiliation, torture, and even the execution of those unable to maintain the pace. These marches often conclude at prisoner of war or internment camps, but tragically, they may continue until every prisoner dies. World history is replete with horrible stories of death marches. For instance, forced marches were used for slaves taken from Africa by slave traders. These slaves were transported to different regions, including the East African trade with Zanzibar and the Atlantic slave trade. In the final stages of the Holocaust, as Allied forces advanced on Nazi concentration camps in Europe, death marches became a grim routine for Jews and other inmates. During the Korean War, prisoners who were held by the North Koreans underwent what became known as the Tiger Death March. There's also the Sandakan Death March in Borneo. Out of the 2,400 Australian and British prisoners who were forced to march from Sandakan to Ranao in Borneo's interior, only 6 survived. The list is long. I poured a significant time researching about death marches in history, and one event in history piqued my interest, and it happened right in the heart of America. The Navajo Long Walk. Well, technically, it didn't take place during a major war, but the essential elements of a death march are undeniably present. Back in the 1860s, the Navajo folks got caught up in some big problems. There was a war going on in America, and the US government was having conflicts with them. So what did the government do? Well, they made the Navajo people leave their homes in Arizona and New Mexico and forced them to go to a terrible place called Bosco Redondo. It's kind of like someone kicking you out of your own house. The journey was called the Long Walk of the Navajo, and it was really tough journey. Picture this. Thousands of Navajo men, women, and kids were made to walk more than 300 miles through really tough terrain. They had to deal with hunger, bad weather, and mean treatment along the way. Just think about it. Being taken away from your homeland, losing your family to sickness and exhaustion, and suffering so much. That's what happened to the Navajo during the Long Walk. Life at the Bosco Redondo was no picnic either. There was a lot of sickness, not enough food, and it was the place the Navajo weren't used to. In short, it was tough. And here's the sad part. All that suffering left deep scars on the Navajo people. They still remember it today, and it's been passed down through generations. It's a really tough chapter in their history. In 2008, the US government said sorry for making Native American tribes like the Navajo move from their lands and treating them badly. They did this by passing something called the Native American Apology Resolution. Through this resolution, the US government admitted that they did wrong things in the past and felt bad about it. While this is a good thing, many Native American groups still want their rights and their cultures to be respected. You see, apologies are really game changers. That same apology, though, didn't come through for the Bataan Death March from the Japanese government. The Tokyo War Crimes Trial was held from 1946 to 1948. It aimed to bring key Japanese war criminals to justice for their actions during World War II. So what happened at this trial? Well, it involved judges from the Allied nations and prosecutors who carefully presented evidence of Japanese war crimes, including the infamous Bataan Death March. The prosecution team didn't hold back. They built a strong case against the Japanese military for how they treated prisoners of war. One of the standout examples they highlighted was the Bataan Death March. Their argument was straightforward. The way prisoners were treated during the march broke international laws and agreements about how prisoners of war should be treated. To back up their case, they pointed to important documents like the Geneva Conventions and the Hague Conventions. General Homa, the Japanese general who ordered the Bataan Death March, was among those put on trial. He was found guilty, and a few months later, on April 3, 1946, he was executed by a firing squad. Among those presented during the Tokyo War Crimes Trial is a little-known death march that occurred during that same year as the Bataan Death March. It happened in my hometown Mindanao, in the southern part of the Philippines. We call it the Mindanao Death March. Filipino and American soldiers who had surrendered in Mindanao went through a tough ordeal. They had to march along a dusty, rugged road with the scorching tropical sun beating down on them. Their journey took them from Camp Keithley in Dansalan to Iligan in Lanao, covering a distance of roughly 36 kilometers or 25 miles. I'll be covering extensively the Iligan Death March in a separate video, the link to which I will be putting in the description link below. But for the meantime, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Many death marches were fueled by extremism and hatred, underscoring the dangers of intolerance. It's crucial for societies to promote tolerance, inclusivity, and respect for diversity. The lessons from history's death marches serve as a stark reminder of the horrors that can occur during times of conflict and the importance of preventing such events from happening through diplomacy, human rights protection, and the promotion of tolerance and peace. That's it for now. See you in the next video.